for you without admitting the painful truth. We, who should have been part of the solution, yet too often we become part of the problem. We people in politics have failed God, we have failed the people, we have failed you. While we have yet to fully determine who is who we failed to do. These words are heavy, but they must be spoken. For too long, our politics have operated under the assumption that for as long as we say the right things, the public will forgive the wrong things. But apologies without acknowledgement are meaningless, and acknowledgement without action is empty. So I say this not as a mere act of contrition, but as an honest reckoning, because unless we first confront our failures, we cannot begin to look into the possibility of societal change. I describe the state of politics in our country as both painful and shameful. Painful because it has become a matter of survival for our democracy. Shameful because it has become a matter of dignity for people in politics. Painful and shameful because it has become a matter of justice for our citizens. Each scandal that rocks the government, each controversy that erodes confidence in governance is not just a headline. It's a wound that cuts deeper into the fragile trust that holds our nation together. We cannot soften the truth or act as if corruption is a small inconvenience or inefficiency. It's merely the cost of doing government work. Corruption is theft. Corruption is stealing, plain and simple. It drains resources meant for the poor and funnels them into the pockets of those who already have more than enough. And inefficiency is not harmless. It is its own form of betrayal. Every delayed service, every broken system, every project left unfinished means real people suffer, lives are put at risk, opportunities slip away, and futures are quietly taken from those who deserve better. This is why it is so difficult today to speak of Jesus, faith, and politics. Because it requires that I first admit how deeply entrenched the problem is. For how can we move forward if we refuse to describe in all its painful truth where we stand today? One story that resonates well in my faith story is that of Zacchaeus. Now more than ever, I can perfectly relate to this story of his encounter with Jesus. And maybe the reason it stays with us is because it touches something true about our own lives. We know the scene almost by heart. A wealthy tax collector, a restless crowd, a man too short to see Jesus. Yet behind its simplicity is a quiet mirror reflecting our own struggles. Zacchaeus was known for all the wrong reasons. His greed, his compromises, his choices that wounded others. The same could be said about many of us in politics today. And yet beneath all that, something in him longed for Jesus. That small, stubborn longing pushes him to climb a sycamore tree, letting go of the image he tried so hard to protect, just to catch a glimpse of grace passing by. Then comes a moment that changes everything. Jesus stops beneath the tree, looks up, probably the first time that anybody has looked up to Zacchaeus, and calls him by name and said, "Zacchaeus, come down, I must stay at your house today." And suddenly the whole crowd murmurs, "He has gone to the house of a sinner." As if Jesus didn't know, as if Jesus was blind to the mess Zacchaeus had made. But Jesus wasn't blind. He was intentional, because grace always walks into the rooms we are most ashamed of. Grace always sits at the table we think are too stained for God. Maybe that is what unsettles us today most about this gospel story. The reminder that Jesus does not wait for us to clean up. He comes to our chaos. He steps in the parts of our story that we would rather hide. He goes straight to the house of the sinner, not to condemn, but to call us back to who we were meant to be. And Zacchaeus responds the only way: a heart touched by God, a heart touched by an unexpected mercy can respond. He stands up, he lets go, he begins again. Salvation enters not only his house, but his life, his heart, and his story. When Jesus walks in, Zacchaeus no longer needed walls to protect him. He starts opening his hands instead of tightening his fists. Maybe this is the call for politicians, for us politicians, and for all of us today, to let Jesus enter the rooms we've locked from business, the workplace, and even politics. To stop hiding behind the tree of excuses and climb down when he calls our name. To believe the worst parts of our stories are not beyond the reach of his grace. It is important that despite the pain and the brokenness, the shame and despair, we are confronted with a simple but life-changing truth. Jesus does not avoid sinners. He seeks us, he stays with us, and he saves us. Zacchaeus' transformation began with an encounter. And that's where the heart of my sharing lies. The church, us, must open itself to more similar encounters with the world, especially the world of politics. Like Zacchaeus, politicians like me are often seen as flawed, corrupt, and beyond redemption. Many of us, both inside and outside the church, are tempted to stand apart, to avoid the messiness of it all. But what if the church, instead of keeping its distance, extended an invitation? What if, like Christ, the church chose to meet politics where it is and inspired it towards redemption? In a world marked by so much division, disillusionment, and distrust, the word politics often feels heavy. When people hear it, many think of ambition detached from principle, power pursued without compassion, and systems that seem to have forgotten the common good. Political discourse has become rough and hostile. Institutions that should protect truth and justice often appear fragile, easily swayed, or even ignored. And so many look at politics not with hope, but with disappointment. In his encyclical letter, Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis reminds us that politics at its best is something beautiful. He calls it a form of charity, maybe even the highest form, because it seeks not just to help individuals, but to create a society where everyone's dignity is honored. He says, once more, I appeal for a renewed appreciation of politics as a lofty vocation, and one of the highest forms of charity in as much as it seeks the common good. Fratelli Tutti 180. Pope Leo XIV, in fact, insists that politicians should bear witness to Christ and their faith. He said, there is no separation in the personality of a public figure. There is not on one side the political person and on the other the Christian. But there is the political person under the gaze of God, and his conscience lives in a Christian manner his commitments and his responsibilities. It is both a deeply heart-moving and comforting thought to recognize that politics is at its core a vocation. In many ways, it is not too different from the call of Zacchaeus, unexpected, humbling, and deeply transformative. And every Christian in public life is invited to reclaim politics from cynicism and reimagine it as a sacred trust. Even if our people carry wounds from betrayal, even if they look at politics with tired eyes, they still hold on to a hope that refuses to die. After all, hope in the language of faith is never passive. It is not wishful thinking. It is trust. Trust in God's promise and trust in our ability to respond with courage and fidelity. To share and live the story of Jesus means taking seriously our responsibility to build a society where every human person is valued, protected, and empowered. It means making the gospel real in governance structures, in public policies, in the concrete struggles of our people. Pope Francis, in his speech before the U.S. Congress, said, "Sometimes we hear, a good Catholic is not interested in politics. This is not true. Good Catholics immerse themselves in politics by offering the best of themselves so that the leader can govern. It is a needed reminder for anyone tempted to step back, because apathy is never neutrality. It is simply giving way. And when good people withdraw from politics, others step in with their motives that may have nothing to do with service or the common good." There was a time, after spending many years of seminary formation in high school and in college, I wonder if leaving the seminary meant I've lost my calling. But now I realize that vocation is not confined to one place or one path. The seeds planted in my formation stayed with me. They shaped me quietly, steadily, even when I didn't fully understand how. I look back now when I see God's gentle hand guiding, redirecting, and preparing me for a purpose I never expected. As St. Paul tells us in his letter to the Romans, chapter 11, verse 29, "For God gifts and His call are irrevocable." God doesn't take back what He plants in our hearts. Standing here this afternoon, I'm reminded that God continues to call us even beyond the walls of seminary and into the world's complex, imperfect spaces. And maybe this is our task as a church, to show that politics, when touched by faith, can become a field of grace. When practiced with humility and integrity, politics stops being a scandal and starts becoming in its own way a sacrament, a place one decision at a time. Pope Francis, in Fratelli Tutti, invites us to imagine a better kind of politics, what he calls a politics of goodness, one that serves the common good, one that is rooted in love, shaped in justice, and places the poor and the vulnerable at its center. It echoes the heart of St. Thomas Aquinas when he said that to love is to will the good of the other, reminding us that politics in the Christian sense is not merely public service, but a concrete expression of love. And so if we want politics to become a way of loving and living like Jesus, let me share 5 key principles that can guide our path: dialogue, discipleship, discernment, dignity of life, and development. First, dialogue. Dialogue at its heart creates a culture of encounter, and without it, a politics of goodness can never take root. I remember sharing this in 2022 when I shared my reflections before the bishops of Asia during the anniversary of the Federation of Asian Bishops' Conferences. I said that many people of faith in Asia avoid politics because they misunderstand the separation of church and state as a rigid wall that keeps faith out of public life. The result is a false divide. Catholic politicians end up navigating difficult political terrain without the spiritual, moral, and pastoral support they need to live out the gospel in public service. In my own journey, I have seen how my personal friendship with clergy and lay leaders have helped steady my steps through the gray areas of political life. Through regular conversations, whether informal meetings, open forums, or simple exchanges, we have shared different perspectives, raised concerns, and listened to each other with openness. I learned that dialogue does not mean agreeing on everything. It simply means meeting one another with honesty, humility, and a shared desire for truth, trusting that God's image is present even in those who differ from us. Since my first term as a congressman, I have tried to nurture these encounters by helping organize small gatherings between bishops and legislators on issues like education, healthcare, indigenous people's rights, and social protection. These conversations have softened public discourse, bridged ideological divides, and allowed diverse voices to converge around shared moral values. More importantly, they help prevent reactive policymaking by ensuring that ethical, theological, and social dimensions are considered before laws are crafted or implemented. Second, discernment. Discernment builds a culture of reflection and conscience, something we urgently need in a time when lawmakers face complex, high-stakes issues like artificial intelligence, reproductive ethics, climate change, criminal justice, and even economic reform. These challenges can't be met by political will alone. They demand moral clarity, spiritual depth, and the steady wisdom of our faith. Politics becomes healthier when decisions are not only legal or expedient, but also when they are humane, just, and rooted in the gospel. Before I ever even entered public service, I was already part of a Catholic community called the Feast, the Light of Jesus community, that gathers weekly for Mass, worship, and preaching. Years ago, someone suggested about bringing the feast to Congress. And honestly, we laughed, unsure if anyone would come. But we planted the seed anyway. And by God's timing, the feast in Congress began just as the corruption scandals were shaking the institutions. People looked at us the way the crowd looked at Jesus entering Zacchaeus' home. They were actually talking behind our backs, saying, what is a charismatic community going to do in Congress? Felt like hearing the words, Jesus has gone to the house of a sinner. But maybe that's exactly where grace needs to appear. During our first gathering in Congress, more than 20 congressmen came, and over 200 staff. Hearts that were tired from the demands of public life found rest. Minds weighed down by pressure found clarity. And maybe after almost a year, people kept coming back because deep down, they're hungry for something steady, something honest, something that reminds them that they are beneath who they are, to remind them who they are beneath the position and the pressure. And this is where discernment comes in. Politics demands so many decisions every day. And without inner clarity, it's easy to get lost in ambition, fear, or survival. When leaders learn to slow down, pray, listen, and let God form their consciences, their choices change, their tone changes, their hearts change. The feast taught me that a politics of goodness begins in a quiet heart that knows how to listen before it decides. Third, discipleship. Discipleship affirms that Catholic leaders in public service are not merely elected officials. We are witnesses of the faith, navigating moral dilemmas, public scrutiny, and moments of spiritual dryness. Many carry these burdens without real spaces for spiritual grounding or pastoral support in the highly politicized atmosphere of Congress or local governance. This is why discipleship matters. It gives Catholic leaders the courage, humility, and grace to live their faith right where it is most tested. It is deeply essential, I believe, for the Church and her pastors to remain present and supportive, accompanying our politicians so that they can persevere in sharing and living the story of Jesus in their public lives. We often think the Church must engage politics only with a strong prophetic voice. But sometimes we forget that a prophet's voice must first rise from a shepherd's heart. Christ's command to go to the highways and byways reminds us that the corridors of power, including the halls of Congress, are also mission fields, that Catholic politicians are part of the flock who need encouragement, spiritual clarity, and even gentle correction when the pressures of public lives become overwhelming. That is why being part of a faith community for me has been a huge part of my own political journey. It reminds me always that I don't walk through the struggles of political life alone, that every step I take is lifted by people who pray for me, guide me, mentor me, and call me back whenever the demands of public life begin to consume me. I once told one of our feast builders, they are our leaders in our community, that the main reason I try to stay on the right path in politics is because of the discipleship I receive from our community. They keep me grounded, they keep me honest, and they keep me connected to the bigger purpose behind all this. 2 Sundays ago, right as the political controversies were getting heavier, during our weekly gathering at the feast, our feast builder who was preaching at that time invited me to stand, and the whole assembly prayed over me. To be honest, I wasn't that comfortable. I didn't expect it, but at that very instant, I was filled with the peace, courage, and quiet confidence to keep serving faithfully. That moment reminded me that public service isn't simply work to be done. It's a vocation, a call to serve with dignity, a call to serve in integrity, and a commitment to choose goodness even when it's difficult. And for me, that is the true heart of discipleship in public life. Allowing God to shape not only what I do, but who I am becoming as I service people. Fourth, dignity of life. Defending the dignity of life is one of the strongest, and I would say most non-negotiable responsibilities of any Catholic in public service. This stems from the Church's unwavering belief that every human person is sacred, from conception to natural death, and must be defended, especially when life is commodified, threatened, or dismissed. For Catholic politicians, this means placing the sanctity of life at the center of public engagement. It includes opposing abortion, euthanasia, and capital punishment, protecting the integrity of marriage and family, defending children, the elderly, persons with disabilities, and the unborn, and resisting any measure that undermines the intrinsic worth of the human person. But the dignity of life goes beyond biological beginnings and endings. It also calls us to defend those whose lives are wounded by poverty, violence, exploitation, displacement, and exclusion. It urges us to craft policies that promote not only survival, but true human flourishing, access to education, decent work, safe communities, and opportunities for spiritual and social well-being. In this broadened sense, defending life means defending the conditions that allow every person to grow, belong, and hope. Last year, in Congress, there was a bill to legalize divorce. And for the information of everybody, the Philippines is the only country in the world other than the Vatican that doesn't have divorce. And when the bill to legalize divorce was presented in the House of Representatives, we did everything to block it. But despite our efforts, it still passed by more or less around 30 votes. And only the Senate's lack of time kept it from moving forward. Many asked, why were we pushing back? Pushing back so strongly, something that the world seemed to be moving in the opposite direction. But for us, the issue was not merely legal. It was a matter of conviction. As Catholic politicians, we cannot conveniently set aside our faith when debates become difficult and when public opinion shifts. Faith shapes how we understand human dignity, family life, and the common good. And even if the bill dealt with civil marriage and not sacramental marriage, we believe that it was our responsibility to defend and safeguard the deeper meaning of married life. What that experience affirmed is something essential. There can be no real divide between the faith we profess and the politics we practice. We cannot preach values on Sunday and abandon them during the week. In public service, faith is not a burden, it's a compass. Pope Leo XIV expressed this powerfully in his audience with French politicians when he said, "When the truth is at stake, a Catholic politician must say, 'No, I cannot.'" A politics of goodness challenges us to choose what is right, even when it is unpopular, to defend human dignity, even when the world goes another way, and to make decisions not only with our minds, but with a conscience shaped by what we believe. Lastly, development. Development means advancing the social mission of the Church through laws, programs, and policies that embody justice, equity, and preferential option for the poor. In his speech to the International Catholic Legislators Network, Pope Leo XIV also said, "Authentic human flourishing is seen when individuals live virtuously, when they live in healthy communities, enjoying not only what they have, what they possess, but also who they are as children of God." Catholic politicians cannot ignore the widening fact between the rich and the poor, the persistent underdevelopment of many regions, or the communities long excluded from national progress. And development is not just economic, it is social, cultural, ecological, and spiritual. True development gives every person and every community the chance to live with dignity and hope. In Congress, in the Philippines, I currently represent Tingog Party List. It's a nationwide constituency that draws its roots in the Eastern Visayas region of the country. The name Tingog, which means voice in our local language, also reflects our mission to ensure that regional voices are heard and valued in the crafting of national policies. That's why we focus on poverty alleviation, sustainable livelihoods, universal health care, access to medicines, and quality education. But we also know that legislation is not enough. So we built, over the last 3 years, a nationwide network of what we call Tingog centers, which serve as one-stop hubs offering medical assistance, social protection, scholarships, and even sustainable livelihood support. Today, 218 Tingog centers across the country help thousands of families daily. Partnering and in many of these efforts, we work closely with Catholic organizations, partnering not only in community programs, but also in shaping legislation for vulnerable groups and building local cooperative initiatives rooted in Catholic values. One of the most important expressions of this collaboration is Catholic education. As chairperson of the House Committee on Higher and Technical Education, I have worked closely with Catholic school leaders to advance public-private complementarity and recognize the vital role of Catholic institutions in forming the minds and values of our people. Together, we have pushed for policies and reforms that strengthen the entire educational ecosystem, ensuring that Catholic schools remain empowered, well-supported, and mission-driven. In this partnership, the Church has become a steady ally, clear in its vision, unwavering in its values, and deeply committed to shaping a new generation with both competence and character. Real development begins with honoring human dignity, seeing every person as someone created by God, worthy of care, opportunity, and hope. To share and live the story of Jesus in politics, therefore, is to lead with compassion and integrity, and to carry a sincere desire to uplift the lives of those whom we are called to serve. So taken together, these 5 principles, dialogue, discernment, discipleship, dignity in life, and development, form a framework for building a politics of goodness. They help move goodness from principle to practice, from conversation to collaboration, from intention to real impact. And in doing so, they shape not only the laws we pass or the programs we build, but the kind of leaders we become and the kind of nation we hope to form. Each principle strengthens the others. Dialogue opens the path to discernment. Discernment deepens discipleship. Discipleship protects and honors life. And life finds its fullness in integral development. When these come together, faith and politics no longer stand apart. They become one continuous mission to think clearly, choose rightly, and serve generously. This is how we share and live the story of Jesus in public life, grounded in conscience, guided by love, open to grace, and always drawing our nation closer to the common good. All these years, I have personally witnessed how deeply politics is in need of the church for guidance, courage, and hope. Leaders like myself need the church to be a steady moral compass, someone who reminds us of what truly matters: integrity, compassion, justice, and care for the most vulnerable. In the middle of political noise and pressure, the church helps us remember the common good and the deeper values that must shape our decisions. And while, and I like to emphasize this, and while we hold positions of civil authority, we have never stopped becoming members of the flock, sons and daughters of the same church that formed our conscience long before we ever entered public service. We need the church to give us courage. Public life is filled with criticism, pressure, and moral gray areas. It's not always easy to choose the right path. When doing so may cause political capital or invite misunderstanding. In those moments, the church, through its teachers, teachings, communities, and its shepherds, gives us the courage to stand firm. It reminds us that integrity matters more than popularity, that choosing what is right is always more important than choosing what is easy. Politics also needs the church to be a source of hope. Progress in government can be slow and the setbacks can be disheartening. Sometimes the work feels heavy enough to dim even the strongest resolve. But the church reminds us that change is possible, that goodness is worth fighting for, and no sincere effort to serve others is ever wasted in God's eyes. This hope sustains us who want to serve with honesty and compassion even when the road is difficult. And yet this relationship is mutual. The church also calls something from us, those in politics. The church asks us to live with humility, to listen deeply to the cries of the poor, and to place the common good above personal gain. It challenges us to use our authority, not to put ourselves above others, but to lift others. Politics may be messy and imperfect, but it remains one of the most powerful ways to shape society. That is why the church cannot turn away from political life. It must continue bringing Christ's love, truth, and mercy into the very rooms where decisions are made, and continue guiding us, your own flock, as we strive to serve faithfully. This Jubilee year, this year of joyful return, calls us to restore all things in Christ. And let's take that call seriously, not just as an invitation for personal renewal, but as a challenge to renew our communities, our politics, and our society. There is a verse in Scripture that never fails to provide me assurance and comfort. Actually, in our house, it's at the door of our dining hall. I place it there. It's from the letter of Paul to Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. Never grow weary of doing good, for at the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. So if there are politicians like me who are here, or those who are thinking of going to politics, I ask you, please don't give up. Stand firm in your faith. Spread hope wherever life takes you. And never hesitate to serve even in the messiest and most complicated spaces, because those are often the places where God's love is needed the most. St. Paul once offered a thought that is both unsettling and comforting. In his letter to the Romans chapter 5 verse 20, he said, where sin increased, grace abounded all the more. And you know, it's a strange pairing, sin and grace, darkness and light, wounds and healing. One drags us down, the other insists on lifting us up. Politics may be one of the most complicated and challenging spaces we can ever step into, but it is also one of the places where God's love is needed the most. It's a world filled with pressure, conflict, constant judgment, where people often expect the worst and seldom look for the good. And yet it is precisely this kind of environment that grace can do its quiet work. All these months of political accusations being fired from all sides, I find myself asking how deep our political troubles really are. And the more I reflect on it, the more I see that our problems run deeper than politics. They touch the moral core of our national life. I have a friend who once reminded me, 8 of every 10 Filipinos are Christian. A simple line, right? But it forces us to look into the mirror. If most of us Filipinos hear the same gospel every Sunday, how do we still end up tangled in dishonesty, shortcuts, and corruption? How can a people known for their kindness and generosity find themselves constantly struggling with issues of integrity? Simply knowing what is good has never been enough. The real test of discipleship is whether we follow Jesus every day in our chosen professions and vocations. As I conclude my sharing, I pray 3 things become clear to us. First, that our political controversies reveal deeper fractures within us. Corruption in public life begins as small compromises in private life. Before a scandal becomes national, it begins with a decision in the heart, a decision to bend, to hide, to lie, and to take more than what's fair. Second, no system of governance survives without virtue. We can write the best laws, perfect our institutions, but if the people running them lack integrity, everything else collapses. Character is a true backbone of public service. Third, crises, for all their messiness, give us clarity. They force us to confront uncomfortable truth. They shake us awake, and sometimes they open doors to renewal, personal and national. And let me add one more thing. In the middle of all this anger and disappointment, in the middle of all the pressures that we have to deal, whether in politics or in our professional lives, we must not lose sight of grace. Grace does not deny wrongdoing. Grace does not excuse it. Grace simply says, change is possible, conversion is possible, and forgiveness is possible if we are honest and courageous enough to ask for it. And so as we confront these moral and political storms, may we remember St. Paul's strange and hopeful promise. Yes, sin abounds, but grace abounds even more. I started with the story of Zacchaeus. Allow me to end with another tax collector, Matthew. I believe Matthew's story speaks to us in our time. In these days, tax collectors were the most despised people in society. They were branded as crooks, as traitors to their own people, even as impure before God. Their neighbors pushed them out of the synagogue. Their word wasn't trusted in court. Their presence was seen as a stain, making sometimes a home unclean just by walking, a tax collector walking through its door. Imagine having to live with that kind of rejection. Every look reminding that you don't belong, every whisper carrying the same judgment. You're a sinner, you're a cheat, you're an outcast. That was Matthew's reality. He carried the weight of a reputation no one wanted. People avoided him in the streets. They kept their distance. To most, he was simply a man not worth their time. And yet, that's the man Jesus chose to see. As Matthew sat at his tax booth, perhaps numb to the daily routine of counting coins, Jesus came along. Not to accuse him, not to condemn him, but to call him. One simple invitation. Come, follow me. No lectures, no conditions, just a call. And Matthew stood up. He left everything behind. He abandoned not just his coin, but the whole life that weighed him down. He walked away trusting that Jesus was worth more than what he gave up. Venerable Bede described it beautifully. In having mercy, he also chose him. That's the power of God's call. He sees not just who we are, but who we can become when we say yes to him. These days, politics feels like Matthew's tax booth. We hear the criticisms, we feel the blame, we are lumped together by sweeping words, corrupt, selfish, and caring. Sometimes we know this thing because it's deserved. We deserve what they say about us. Because we too have failed in the good that we're called to do. And if we're honest, to be honest, the weight of judgment can be discouraging. It can make us tired. It can even make us want to give up. But then Christ speaks again. Come, follow me. His call doesn't vanish when we are criticized. It doesn't fade when we are weary. It doesn't disappear even when we fall short. It remains steady, patient, waiting for us to rise again. And that call of living and sharing the story of Jesus in our lives is never just about walking away from something. It's always about walking with and towards Jesus. Let me end with a prayer that has never failed to guide and inspire me in spite of the heavy and overwhelming struggles of political life. Is it okay? Can you pray with me? Hello. Dearest Lord, teach me to be generous. Teach me to serve you as I should. To give and not to count the cost. To fight and not to heed the wounds. To lay toil and not to seek for rest. To labor and not to look for any reward. Save that of knowing that I do your holy will. And so we pray, Lord, teach us to let go of the burdens we cling to, our pride, our fear, our need to approve ourselves. Teach us to follow you more than the applause of people, more than the comfort of security, more than the weight of our own reputation. Because in the end, it's not about us, it's about you. Not about defending ourselves, but about bearing witness. Not about holding on, but about letting go. Not about proving our worth, but about trusting in yours. Come follow me. May we hear those words. And like Zacchaeus and like Matthew, may we rise, leave everything behind, and begin with you again. Amen. Thank you for listening, and may God bless us as we continue to be instruments of love and goodness in the world. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Congressman. We now entertain one or two questions before we go to St. Anne. Just raise your hand, come forward, introduce your name, and raise your question.
Just one more question.
Yes. And another person who would like to ask, please come forward. Only one wants to ask question.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Congressman. I'm also a politician. I'm a commissioner of Myanmar National Human Rights Commission. So I have waited for 3 months to get permission from my boss to come here. So and finally I was allowed to come to this Congress. And I am the only Catholic politician commissioner in Myanmar government also. So I try to bring the Catholic values, the teaching of Jesus in our cabinet level also. So I have different experiences. Sometimes I am more constructive and positive than those policies in government, the congressman understands in the government. Anyway, so today I follow up his sharing his witnesses, and then a lot of inputs and inspirations I got from him. One question that I would like to ask him is, the whole Congress, the whole Congress in Philippines, the members are Catholics, I hope. I think 99%, I might be wrong. But how these Catholic politicians come to have difference on defending the dignity of life, especially during the previous government, on killing the drug users, so-called, and things. So all of you are Catholic politicians, but when you come to the point of protection to the dignity of life, how you have fought from the point of protecting the human life, which is the image of God. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that very difficult question. Dignity of life is a key element of our Christian witness in politics. In fact, all these past years, we've really been working on a set of bills preventing their passage, all towards affirming that belief and also ensuring the integrity of married life and, of course, the human person. But then again, it's always a challenge when there is a tendency to dichotomize what dignity of life requires of us. It's very easy sometimes to look at issues when it's presented in silos. When you try to define dignity of life from a point of, I'm against abortion or I'm against this. But sometimes when they cross towards certain issues like security or public order, as I always say in politics, it is seldom black and white. And most of the decisions would involve navigating in gray areas. And this is where the guidance of the church would really be very helpful. Because many of us politicians, especially in the Philippines, we may be Catholic in name, but sometimes we have not really grown maturely in the same conviction as we have. When we were debating, for example, on the bill on the legalization of divorce in the Philippines, I was trying to discourage some of the younger politicians from voting in favor of it. But I could see how convinced they were about the validity of their own position. And the same conviction I could get from those people who were for the war against drugs, and they seem to easily dispense with the lives of those who were caught in it or those who were killed as a result of these extrajudicial killings or even people who are crime crusaders, who think that capital punishment is a just way of punishing people. Now, I cannot speak for them, nor I cannot condemn them, but it only reminds me of one thing, that so much work needs to be done in order to form consciences of people in government. And it's not a finished job. It's something that continues to be in the process. And that's why we really work hard on making sure that we have contacts with bishops, priests, and on a more practical level. We've been organizing meetings with some bishops and congressmen. I bring in my congressman friends, or the younger ones, and then I bring in my bishop friends. And you know what? One thing we've realized, bishops and politicians, we usually talk to each other during social occasions, but never sometimes to talk about the issues of the day. And when we made that intentional effort of bringing them together, the very politicians would say, these bishops, they really care for the people. And then the bishops would say, these young congressmen, they really know what they're doing. And that encounter has actually helped us understand, and we've done that small conferences in topics like education, topics like indigenous persons' rights, and even healthcare and other issues. And that dialogue has developed a sense of, may not be agreement in all forms or in all instances, but a sincere respect for each other's position.
Thank you, Congressman Jude. Thank you for giving us a glimpse of your life as a Catholic politician and showing us the politics of goodness. We assure you we will pray for you, not only in our country, but also all the peoples of Asia, all citizens, all voters, remembering that good Christian makes a good citizen. We shall now have our announcements.
Thank you, Father Felber. Once again, now we are going to have quick coffee, and your packed snacks are ready outside of the hall. So the buses will leave now onwards to Zindan's Basilica. So please remember, we'll have Holy Mass first, then dinner, then we have session from Archbishop Christopher Prowse, then Father Rope. Then the buses will start to leave from there to come back 9:30 onwards, but it is not necessary that everybody has to come at 9:30. The buses will leave there from there till the concert finish. So those who want to leave early, 9:30 onwards, buses are ready. So buses will be there at the dropping point, same point where you are getting dropped. So buses will leave from 9:30 onwards and come back. Tomorrow morning, here we will come as usual, 8 a.m. in the morning. Thank you very much.
Short copy? Yes. Ano yung copy deck? Short copy? So, sa may paano matapos?
Like idiot is so difficult, na? Yes, Christian values are politics.
Pero tinangan dyan ako ang Japan na masudlan ako ang pari politics. Kaya ako, naano biyak ko sa high school pa, kaya interested ako naman sa politics. May nalang kay karoon na sa karamay. Pero sa politics, marang gina-force na ako sa politics. At itong election din ni Marcos, active ko, pero ang framework na ko, everything is under the kingdom of God by God's word. For example, wala example sa kingdom ni God. Dili expose ko na ano ko ganyan yung sulti. All these troubles to the Kurang pwede lang kung pero busog ko, kapira ko, kapira.